what's up guys, and welcome to 31 Vulcanist, the Primalist range single target DPS soul. Vulcanist has some pretty extreme bursts and has a really unique style of gameplay that was just recently introduced. Vulcanist is a spec you should definitely have in your arsenal if you plan on playing Primalist, as it's a very competitive DPS and it's also a lot of fun to play. In this guide I'll show you where to put your points, which masteries to select, as well as how to play Vulcanist, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Looking at the soul tree breakdown, you'll see something that's fundamentally different than we're used to in Rift. That is that the point systems are a little different with Primalist. You'll see we only have a total 39 points. 31 of those points will be going in the Vulcanist soul. For the the secondary and tertiary souls, you'll be going 4 in Dervish and 4 in Typhoon. That's to pick up 16% attack power weapon damage from Dervish and 16% attack power weapon damage from Typhoon. Because we went 31 points in Vulcanist, we do pick up a couple of key abilities in the bottom of the tree, such as Ethereal Beam, which is an extremely strong channel, and Skill Shot, which is an extremely strong cooldown that you can proc once every 10 seconds. Moving over to the Masteries, level 61, we take Primordial Strength. This is going to allow your critical hits with single target damaging and healing abilities to apply a 3% maximum health shield to you once every 6 seconds. This is pretty standard stuff. A lot of the different souls, or a lot of different callings have something like that. Level 62, we take Totemic Power. This is going to allow your Skill Shot to spread the debuff Slagged to up to 5 additional enemies within 7 meters when it hits an enemy. This one right here is going to be procced off your Skill Shot once every 10 seconds. Slagged is procced off of a damage over time ability in the Vulcanist tree. So what you will do typically is cast Conflagurate, and then you'll get to full Fury, and you'll fire off Skill Shot, which will then spread that 5% debuff to all the enemies. So pretty standard stuff there. We'll talk about how to do that more thoroughly in the rotation section. Level 63, we take Vulpine Cunning. This is going to reduce the cooldown on Stroke of Brilliance by 3 seconds. Stroke of Brilliance typically has a 5-second cooldown, but because we have this mastery, it's a 2-second cooldown. This is a unique ability that has a really cool integration with the whole Fury Cunning bar that we'll discuss later on. Moving up to level 64, we take Elemental Affinity. This is going to make your damaging abilities apply a stack of Elemental Affinity to you for each damage type that you use. This means that you'll get a 6% damage increase once this is up. Pretty standard stuff there. Level 65, of course, we take the energy manipulation type ability called Spiritualism as a Primalist. This is going to make your next 5 damaging abilities deal an additional approximately 6,700 to 7,500 ethereal damage to the enemy. So pretty good stuff there. So that's it for the Souls and Masteries, guys. Pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and talk about the macros briefly. So I don't use a whole lot in Vulcanist. There's a lot of stuff you have to have on separate buttons, and Vulcanist is probably not the easiest spec to play in the game. However, it is still relatively easy to play. It's all about a priority system. So starting with the first macro here, we have the spam macro. You'll see at the top I do use a shift modifier. If you've watched any of my guides before, you know that I like shift modifiers a lot for streamlining builds and making them take up less buttons. However, if you do not want to manage that, I also have it on my 6th key here. If you would like to press it from there, you can go ahead and just delete that line. Starting at the top here, we have Vorpal Salvo. It's going to be a main spam ability that you have that you will proc off of various abilities. Rage Spike, of course, is going to give you more instant cast Vorpal Salvos. We have Precision Bolt, which is going to be a main spammer when you don't have any of those instants up. If you have to move for whatever reason, then you're going to be Fury Blast is going to be your movement damage ability. But if you have a Skill Shot proc, you'll be able to consume that first while you're on the move. That's why it's after Precision Bolt there. And of course, at the end, pretty standard stuff. Cast itself Spiritualism at the end of the macro to make sure that you keep that buff up at all times. Now, if you're in a raid where you're trying to time your abilities with cooldowns and such, you can pull this out of the macro and manage it separately if you so choose. For the secondary macro here, we have Cast at GTAE, Summon Beacon of the Drake. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the macro system, at GTAE is Ground Targeted Area of Effect. So you'll put this in the macro, and then you'll click on whatever the target is, and as soon as you click this macro, it'll just plop the beacon down versus you having to ground target it manually yourself. Again, if you don't want to do that, you can manually manage that as well. Third macro, Primal Avatar Drake. This is going to be every Primalist soul has a Primal Avatar type of cooldown. This is the Primal Avatar cooldown for the Vulcanist. It's Primal Avatar Drake, and it is going to increase the damage of your fire and earth abilities by 20%, but more importantly, it's going to make the next 5 single target damaging abilities you do deal additional ethereal damage. This is a pretty big cooldown, and it also sets you to full Fury. We'll talk about that interaction a little bit later in the rotation section though. You also have Skill Shot right after that because, like I said before, it puts you at full Fury, and that is what procs your Skill Shot instant casts. So you're going to have this at the bottom of this macro so that you can tap this twice to fire off your Skill Shot. And of course, we just have a quick root macro here, and that's specifically just so I can label it, because when I first start playing a build, I typically like to label a lot of my buttons just to remember what they do. I do play a lot of different callings. So That's it for the macros, guys. Let's go ahead and discuss the action bar briefly. So starting at the top left here, we have Font of Wit. If you're not familiar with Primalist, the Primalist buffs are all labeled as fonts. You can only have one active at a time. This one is going to increase the critical hit chance by 10%, which is pretty important for Vulcanists. They're pretty reliant on crits. Over to the right, we have Infusion. This is going to make the Primalist single target damaging abilities deal an additional 10% damage as ethereal damage. Now, ethereal damage is very important because, as you notice when you look at your stats, there's no ethereal resist. So ethereal damage is complete. That's how much damage it's going to do. There's no resisting it. So it's why it's really awesome, especially in PvP. Moving over to the right, we have Spiritualism. Of course, we already discussed what this does. This is a self buff. Typically, in the beginning of the fight, you'll target myself and fire that off to ensure that you have it preloaded. Moving over to the secondary bar here, we have on the Z key, on the Z keybind, Stroke of Brilliance. This ability, like I said before, is going to deal around 10,000 damage, but it will do an additional 100% of that damage if you're at True Harmony. True Harmony is going to be 20 towards Fury, to 0 to 20 towards Cunning. That's the little range that you have for True Harmony. 20 Fury, 0, and 20 Cunning. You can cast that at any point during that time, and it'll do 100% damage. However, because we have 31 points in Vulcanus, you also pick up an additional 50% damage for a total 150% damage if you're at 0. So when you're at 0, you always want to try and use your Stroke of Brilliance because it's going to do 150% more damage, or approximately 25k or so base, which is one of the highest priority spam abilities that you're going to have. So you're going to have to watch for that. On the Q keybind, we of course have the Primal Avatar Drake buff, as well as the skill shot that's right underneath it. That's this ability here. On the E keybind, we have Precision Bolt. This is here specifically so that we can maintain the buff, the 10% damage buff that you get for casting this. On the R key, we have Conflagrate. This is going to be a really powerful damage over time ability that's also going to increase non-physical damage taken by the target by 5%. You want to maintain both of these two buffs. Moving down to the main bar, we have the Rage Strike, or the spam macro that has Rage Spike as the show here. This is going to be where you spend a lot of your time. We have 2. This is Ethereal Beam. This is your really strong ethereal channel. On 3, we have Molten Wave. This is a really important part of this build because it's where you get most of your AoE/cleave from. Molten Wave is going to be your quote-unquote Fury consumer. So whenever you start stacking up quite a bit of Fury, since this build is Fury intensive, you'll use your Molten Wave to consume that and also deal a great deal of damage. We'll talk more about this usage later in the video. Number 4, Skill Shot. I typically will only use Skill Shot from Q in the opener and when I'm using Primal Avatar Drake. Other than that, I will usually proc it from the 4 key. However, if you'd like to proc it from the Q key, you can do that. You just want to be careful not to waste your Primal Avatar Drake macro, or your ability here, because it is going to put you into full Fury. So let's say you've just procced a Skill Shot and it's only been 5 seconds. If you hit your Primal Avatar Drake and it puts you back to full Fury, you cannot proc another Skill Shot. So that's why you want to be careful and make sure that you're not wasting that Fury portion of the Primal Avatar Drake there. On the 5 key here, we have Summon Beacon of the Drake. This is kind of a unique ability across a lot of different Primalist souls as well. A lot of them get beacons. This beacon right here will summon a Beacon of Drake at the target location. It'll increase your damaging abilities, or cause you to deal 5,000 or so damage to 8 enemies every second or so, based off of what else you're casting. I'll show you how this works in a minute. This thing does massive amounts of damage. Last week was the first week that Primalist came out, and this week I believe they fixed it because it is doing quite a bit of damage now. On the 6 key, of course, we have Fury Blast, as I discussed previously. Fury Blast is also in your 1 macro on a shift modifier, so you can hit shift 1 to cast it, or you can cast it from 6 if you're not comfortable with shift modifiers. If you do end up using the shift modifier, you can go ahead and just move that Fury Blast off your bar and put something else there, if you so choose. On 7, we have Ancestral Force. This is going to be one of those abilities that you get as your level 65 mastery. Typically, if you're going to be in an AoE type of environment and you don't have Dervish or Typhoon or Berserker built yet, you can swap this mastery to Ancestral Force, and it works very similar to how the Warriors and the Rogues one does. It does massive damage to 8 enemies, so you can swap out to that if you want to use this build for AoE as well, and then continue with your Molten Wave type stuff. So moving over to the right, on number 8, we have Resilient Hide. This is going to be a 25% reduction to the Primalist for 8 seconds. It only works in PvP. It's one of those Primalist abilities that you get. Pretty cool. Number 9, Primal Warp. This is going to be pretty similar to Shadow Warp on the Reaver. So teleport 15 meter forward and removes all crowd control effects. So that functions as an extra break free as well. On the middle click button, we have Lava Lance. This is your standard interrupt. It does work as of this week now, so that's good. On the minus key, we have a root, 30-second root for 5 seconds. Again, pretty powerful in PvP. And of course, on the equals key, we have the standard break free. So that's it for the action bar, guys. Let's go ahead and discuss K-alerts, and then we'll show you how to play it. So for the K-alerts, I only track about 5 things here. We'll go ahead and hit Edit Layout. As you can see at the very top, we have the 20% damage increase from Primal Avatar here. That does last 15 seconds, so that'll show you how much time you have left on your damage increase. On the bottom here, we have the clarity of focus. This is going to be what tells you how many instant cast Vorpal Salvos that you have. You don't necessarily have to track that. I like to track that to kind of see how the rotation's playing out, because Vulcanist is so malleable. It's very modular. It's not necessarily going to be a hard and fast rotation, so I like to track it. This will just show you how many stacks you have. I believe the max is about 4. Moving down to the bottom, you have the 3 most important ones. We have Precise Aim. This comes from casting your Precision Bolt. We have your Conflagurate. This measures your dot duration, so you want to make sure that you keep that up because it does quite a bit of damage. And then of course we have your Fury Blast dot, which comes from either your Shift 1 or your 6 key, and this does 12,000 damage initially, but it also does a massive damage over time ability if you're in Fury. And we'll talk more about the usage on that here in a little bit. So that's it for the K-alerts, guys. Pretty simple. There's a couple other things that you can track if you choose to. However, I think this is pretty simplistic and this works pretty well. Pulls pretty decent numbers. So now that we've talked about the K-alerts, let's go ahead and discuss how you play Vulcanist. The Vulcanist rotation actually isn't too bad. The one thing you're going to want to keep in mind is that your skill shot is on a 10-second internal cooldown. Now what that means is that when you get to 100 Fury, you're going to proc an instant cast skill shot, but you can only do that once every 10 seconds. Now there's no way to currently track that internal cooldown, but I'm sure some players in the Rift community will eventually come up with a solution. Another thing you want to keep track of is that your Drake, your Beacon of the Drake, does get cast at the enemy's location. So if you have a boss that has high movement, you want to be careful about flopping it down until the boss has a stationary moment, such as like Merdantix in Hammernell. And lastly, of course, we have the Stroke of Brilliance here. You want to make sure that you're casting this when you either have 20 Fury, 0, which is True Harmony, or 20 Cunning. At 20 Fury and 20 Cunning, it does about double damage, which is roughly 20,000 for me. And then in the middle here, it does about 25 because you get an additional 50% bonus to that 100%, making it 150%. So keep that in mind while you're playing the Vulcanist of the Primalist calling. So let's go ahead and discuss how we do this, guys. So first we're going to target ourselves. We're going to make sure we have Font of Wit up, which is the 10% crit chance. We're going to make sure we have Infusion up, which is the 10% extra ethereal damage. And then of course we're going to preload Spiritualism before the fight. We're going to target our boss here. The first thing you're going to want to do is cast your Precision Bolt. Now typically you're going to want to try and pre-cast this. Now what I mean by that is the tank's going to go, okay, pulling in 3, 2, and at that point you'll start casting your Precision Bolt because it is a 1-second cast, and that way it'll fire off, and by the time the tank pulls, you'll be able to have that off already and essentially get that global cooldown for free. So once that's fired off with your E key, you'll move over to your R key and hit Conflagurate, which is going to get your 5% non-physical damage increase up. That is also going to increase your Cunning to 20. Precision Bolt increases your Fury by 20. Conflagurate increases your Cunning by 20, so that's going to put you back at 0. Then of course you're going to hit your Z key, which is Stroke of Brilliance. Because you're at 0, it's going to do 150% damage, so you're going to get a nice little damage bump there. That's going to give you a plus 40 Fury. Then you're going to move and do a Shift 1, which is going to be your Fury Blast, which is going to give you 40 Cunning, putting you back at 0, and also apply that damage dot. Because if you read the tooltip here, if used while in Fury, it applies a dot that lasts 8 seconds. That damage over time ability does a lot of damage. So you want to make sure that you're only casting that when you have 40 Fury or higher. And the way that you'll know you're in Fury is, of course, up here. You'll see this little guy will be lit up red, and also your Fury Cunning bar will be lit up red as well. So after that, after you've done your Fury Blast, you're going to do 2 for Ethereal Beam. That's going to be a 3-second channel. That'll give you 120 Cunning, which is going to tap you out at the end of this bar. And once that's done, you're going to tap your Q key twice, which is going to fire off Primal Avatar Drake. And then it's going to fire off Skill Shot, because you're going to proc it when you go full Fury, because your Primal Avatar is going to slam your bar all the way up to 100 Fury here and proc that Skill Shot for you. Once you fire off your skill shot, you're going to fire off your Summon Beacon of the Drake macro here. Once that's done, you're going to hit your Spam macro twice, which is going to fire off Vorpal Salvo, and then it's going to fire off Rage Spike, which is going to give you more Vorpal Salvos. And then you're going to do a Shift 1 to refresh your Fury Blast, because Fury Blast does only last like 8 seconds. Then once that's done, you're going to go immediately into a Molten Wave. Molten Wave is a really strong channel that you get that also has really cool cleaving capabilities. So you're going to go into that. That's going to be about a 3-second channel. Once that's done, you're going to need to refresh your Precision Bolt, and you're going to need to refresh your Conflagurate, and then you're going to hit your Spam key 4 times. Once that's done, that'll get you up to 100 Fury, and you'll proc another skill shot. So you'll spam that skill shot, then you'll do a Shift 1 to refresh that Fury Blast, and then you'll do another Spam macro, and back to Molten Wave. Now all of this probably sounds pretty crazy to you. It's not exactly a very fluid rotation. However, when you start playing the Vulcanist and Primalist, you'll kind of feel it out and know what I'm talking about. This isn't necessarily rotation, this is just the order that I play Primalist in the beginning. After that, it's basically just you're looking at your rotation and you're doing things based on priorities. You're making sure that you're maintaining your precision bolt buff and your conflagrate buff. Make sure you're maintaining your fury blast, and then make sure that you're popping your skill shot as often as you can. And that, aside from that, it's essentially staying in your spam macro. So let's go ahead and actually see what this thing looks like now. So first thing we're going to do, of course, is target ourselves. Make sure that our font of wit and infusion are up. Then we're going to make sure we precast our spiritualism. We're going to target the boss, and then we're going to fire off our precision bolt, conflagrate, strike of brilliance, shift 1 for fury, ethereal beam, and then we're going to go straight into our QQ, and then the Drake, spam twice, shift 1, and then to a molten. You can see we're doing about 66k or so, and then refresh precision bolt, refresh conflagrate, and spam button 4 times till you hit 100, skill shot, fury blast on shift 1, back to spam, and then back to 3. So you can see it kind of sounds a little confusing. It's definitely not that bad though. We're going to keep going. I'm going to show you what this looks like. Shift 1 to refresh that, refresh precision bolt, refresh conflagrate. We're going to go ahead and go into our ethereal beam because we want it to be up at the same time as the other one here. And then we're going to keep spam until we get back into our fury so we can refresh our fury blast there, back into molten wave, refresh precision bolt, refresh conflagrate. And now we need to get back over to our, I should have used stroke of brilliance there. We're going to shift 1 for the fury blast, 4 for the strike. You can see we're doing about roughly 46, about 47 here. We're about to have our Primal Avatar ability back up, shift 1 and 2 for ethereal beam. Now we're going to be able to use our Primal Avatar and proc the other buff back to 5, and you keep on going. So that's what it looks like, guys. Pretty easy. You see we're pulling about 47.6 or so, almost 48. And you know, I really did goof this up quite a bit compared to how I've been playing it lately. So apologies for that. I usually play a lot better, but as you guys probably know, narrating is not an easy task. So there it is, guys. Minute 30, about 47 or so, and I'll have the gear that I'm wearing at the end of this video. I will put a couple notes up as well as a little bit of tips and tricks on how to play Vulcanist. It is a very turret spec for those of you who aren't familiar with that term. What it means is a lot of stuff that you're going to be casting like ethereal beam and molten wave are stationary, so you want to try and stay still as much as you can. You do have some options for mobility with your Vorpal Salvo and your stroke of brilliance and such, but a lot of your stuff, your main damage abilities aren't mobile, so you want to be careful to not move and interrupt them because it is a really big DPS loss if you aren't able to get those fully off. But that's it, guys. If you have any questions, as always, please leave them in the comments section. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will see you guys next time.